Early in 2011, I was fortunate enough to get hold of a couple of 1970s vintage Raleigh 20 bicycles. I spent the next couple of months refurbishing them, at the end of which I had two excellent folding bicycles in perfect condition, ready for another 30 years of use. I had become increasingly interested in how the 20 would compare with its contemporary, the non-folding, conventional wheeled classic English 3-speed, the Raleigh Sports. Having completed the second of my Raleigh 20s, I was looking around for something to do in the bicycle line when all of a sudden, completely unexpectedly, my next door neighbour asked me if I would be interested in taking a couple of bikes off his hand. I went and had a look at them, and to my absolute astonishment, they were both Raleigh Sports. One is 1972, that's the burgundy one, and the other one is 1979. The Raleigh Sport, of course, was an iconic 3-speed. In fact, it was the 3-speed of the 1950s, 60s and 70s, and really only ceased production in 1980 or the 80s. So, after giving profuse thanks, I wheeled the bikes round to my garage and set to work, and within 2 months or so the job was done. This is how the red Raleigh Sport turned out after the renovation process, and I must say I'm very pleased with the way it's turned out. A lot of the components I thought might present a problem, particularly the chrome rims and the handlebars and also the chain wheel, which were pockmarked with lots of small pieces of rust. That was removed by dint of a lot of aluminium foil and also some silver polish, and then the whole lot topped off with a coating of turtle wax. But the actual configuration of the bicycle, both the rims and the hubs, both front and rear, were made by Sturmey Archer, which is a little bit of a surprise. This is the infamous automatic brake fitted to the Raleighs of this time. The only non-original component is the seat tube, which I've had to replace to enable me to ride it. The first one was far too short. The seat, which is the original Brooks, is very comfortable. The paintwork, again after much scrubbing and effort, has come up very nicely. I did actually repaint the white section at the back with a reflector on it, but I very quickly discovered at the beginning of the process that it's a mistake, a big mistake. If you're trying to return a bicycle to its original configuration, it's a big mistake to try and touch up the paintwork, because you never get the thing to match properly. The only real difficulty I had in the restoration process was in the removal of the crank cotters, which are notoriously difficult, and even with the assistance of a tool I managed to completely destroy one in the process. Since the tyres and tubes were nearly 40 years old, I decided to replace them, and was fortunate enough to find a pair of 26 by 1 3/8 Kenda tyres, virtually identical to the ones that were fitted originally, except they didn't have the tan sidewall, which is what I prefer the plain version anyway. And the only other replacement was a brake cable. The rear brake cable was not in very good condition. As far as the overall design is concerned, the only other complaint I would have is the gearing. It's absolutely ridiculously high. It's got a 46-tooth chain wheel, a 17-tooth sprocket, and that gives a top ratio of 94 gear inches. The middle one is 70, and the bottom is 53. That would even be high for a race bike. In fact, the bike was such a bear to ride with this high gearing that after a couple of test rides I went up to the local shop and ordered a replacement 21-tooth sprocket, which I've now obtained and fitted. And I'll move in closer here, and you can put the 17-tooth, I've lodged it in the frame above so you can see the difference. So the middle gear, gear 2, is really now the default setting for general riding on level ground around the streets of the neighbourhood. But if conditions are particularly favourable, you can click into gear 1, and that's quite rideable. Or if you come across adverse conditions on hills or whatever, you go to gear 3 and it'll climb up the side of a wall pretty well compared with what it did before. Well, that's the end of part 1 of the renovation process. It was time to look at the blue ladies version, which was also part of the deal that I made for the princely sum of $0. And with this bike, having gone through the process with the men's Raleigh Sport, a lot of the tasks which had presented perhaps slight problems on the men's version were now easier to deal with, since I was some distance up the learning curve. Well, apart from another cotter pin removal struggle, everything was quite straightforward. In fact, I really enjoyed it. But these slow pans show the results. It's interesting to note that this bike was made, or at least assembled, at the Canadian Raleigh plant in Quebec, as you can see from the little sticker at the bottom of the seat tube. If anything, the standard of finish is slightly better than the English product. The chrome has come up really well. Here you can see the shine on the steel brake caliper and its reflection on the mudguard. The 3-speed hub and the steel Sturmey Archer rim also come up well. And then, as we move slowly forward, up the down tube to the head, you can see also that the frame and the handlebar finish is also in great condition. Now, with both bikes finished and accompanied by my daughter Kate, who rode the blue ladies model, we rode to the beautiful waterfront trail, which, as the name suggests, follows the north shore of Lake Ontario. We wanted to get away from vehicular traffic to assess how the 50-year-old designs performed and compared with those of the present day. We picked a part of the trail which included a short, sharp incline and recorded our rides along it. My modified gearing meant that we now both have similar ratios for both bikes. We rode our routes in middle gear throughout, at cadences of between 60 and 70 pedal strokes per minute. As you can see, the incline presented no problem, and if it had, we still had another gear to use. See how smooth it is? She makes it look quite effortless. I hope I shall be able to do as well. The bikes are very smooth and quiet. They're easy to ride and very comfortable. Our consensus was that for riding around town, for shopping, etc., they're hard to beat. For longer distances, there's no problem there, provided that speed is not a priority. Both Kate and I are regular cyclists, and for us, open road riding the rallies at speeds of, say, up to 25 kilometers an hour would be fine. Above this, the increasing efforts in achieving higher speeds would not really be worth the effort. Having said that, these wonderful bikes are still capable of providing comfortable and reliable transportation with minimal maintenance virtually indefinitely.